The CEO coaching experience in Washington may be over, and if it is, it's even more reason they need to go out and get Brandon Aiyuk.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the world. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, also writing for Commanders on SI, and you can follow me on X at DHarrison82. Coming up on today's episode, the Commanders need to stop trying to fix positions that are not actually broken, and one viral catch does not necessarily guarantee a roster spot in 2026. But first, the CEO coaching experience in Washington may be over, and if it is, it's even more reason the Washington Commanders need to go get Brandon Aiyuk this offseason. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing it today thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you can bet just $5 on FanDuel, and if that first bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the app. The CEO coaching experience may be over in Washington, and if it is, getting Brandon Aiyuk this offseason is going to be clutch. When Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn came here, he said he's not going to run his defense. He doesn't want to do play calling on game days. He wants to be basically the executive head coach. He wants to oversee everything. He wants to be able to bounce around, float around as much as he possibly can, trust his defensive coordinator, trust his offensive coordinator to run their sets independently, but just be ready and be able to handle business where he needs to be. I love that approach. That is my preferred method. I like to believe if I ever had the opportunity to become an NFL head coach, that's how I would want to run things. OC, go craft our offense. DC, go craft our defense. I'll come through. I'll help quality control, quality check, give my 2 cents where I need to, and be able to float wherever I'm needed the most on a matchup to matchup basis. I love that approach. However, this season, especially with the defense, the way things were going with Joe Witt Jr., unfortunately, Dan Quinn saw it fit to say, look, I got to go over here and I got to make this happen. And so far in the 2 weeks that he's taken the reins, it's been a positive, there's been a positive result. And obviously it's opened up the door to the question, is Dan Quinn going to now continue to run his own defense into 2026, or are we going to revert back to a new defensive coordinator coming in and that new defense coordinator getting the opportunity to run the unit? Dan Quinn was asked that question and basically said what you would expect him to say, in the sense that it's too early to tell. It's too early to really make that decision. But he did leave the door open for it to possibly happen, where Dan Quinn coming in 2026 will also be calling his own plays. I think what's important to remember here in this conversation is that the way that it's happening right now, at least from our understanding, is that the day-to-day during the week has not changed. Joe Witt Jr. is still incredibly instrumental in the planning, in the creation of the game plan, all the stuff that you usually do. It's the game day activities. It's the navigating of the game flow, the ebbs and flows of a competition, all those things that Dan Quinn is basically taking over and doing the play calling. So it is important to also identify that, because it does leave Dan Quinn open to, if he needs to float over to the offense during the week to make sure some things are tightened up and things like that, he still has that ability. So I want to make sure that is clear. But the reason we're talking about this is because today's Mailbag Wednesday, Insider TJ came through asking about the Brandon Aiyuk to DC, Washington, DC, possibilities, wanting to know about the latest buzz around the San Francisco 49ers, and specifically the news regarding his contract guarantees, his known friendship with Jayden Daniels, and is a move to Washington realistic, or is it fan fiction? And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it's absolutely realistic. The move for Brandon Aiyuk to come to Washington, 1,000% realistic, because of that relationship with Jayden Daniels, supported by the relationship with Adam Peters. Now, there's a little bit of caveat there, but let's start with Jayden Daniels, right? So if you don't know already, Brandon Aiyuk, Jayden Daniels, teammates at Arizona State when Jayden first entered the college football ranks. They've been best friends, really good friends ever since, continue to talk on a daily to weekly basis, all those types of things. Last offseason, after Jayden Daniels was drafted to the Washington Commanders, Brandon Aiyuk was trying to get a new contract from the San Francisco 49ers. And was doing all this public posturing and things that I honestly don't like when you see a player trying to get a new contract, to be honest with you. But he was doing all these things. And Jayden was in a lot of these videos. He's FaceTiming Jayden. There was the infamous, incident where it looked like Brandon had, access to a Washington Commanders offensive playbook, things like that. Brandon did an interview where Jayden was in the room. He wasn't in the interview, but he was in the room while the interview was going on. And they're like, well, if you can't play for San Francisco, who do you want to play with? And Brandon basically was like pointing or gesturing towards Jayden. It was like, that guy over there. So obviously there is a desire for Jayden and Brandon to play together once again. That much is clear. That's a personal side. The business side of this thing is Brandon Aiyuk, one, a fit for what the Washington Commanders want to do? And two, is he going to be able to be brought in at a dollar point that makes him happy as a free agent, and also makes Adam Peters happy as a general manager? So the news behind that, Brandon Aiyuk eventually got his big contract from the San Francisco 49ers. However, he then subsequently injured his ACL, actually just injured his knee. He's got multiple injuries in that knee during the workouts, during the recovery. I don't know exactly what's going on, but basically Brandon hasn't been around the team, hasn't been attending meetings, hasn't been doing all these types of things. And the 49ers essentially looked at it and said, this is basically you not fulfilling the needs in your contract. So we're going to void your guaranteed money starting in 2026 moving forward. What that does is it clears the ability. So when you hear dead cap, what dead cap is the remainder of guaranteed money left on a contract. So if the 49ers are able to successfully void the remaining guarantees on Brandon Aiyuk's contract, then when they release him, or if they release him, they wouldn't have the dead cap hit that you would with those guarantees in place. That essentially clears the road for them to be able to release him in the 2026 offseason, which then leaves him a free agent to go out and sign with whoever he darn well pleases. And as we can tell, it would please him to play with Jayden Daniels again. So there's a very real possibility here. The Washington Commanders are a very real landing spot. And if, as far as the concerns of, is Brandon Aiyuk going to be a problem in the locker room? Is he going to be a problem here? Is he going to be a problem there? Not only does Jayden Daniels know this man, Adam Peters knows this man. Adam Peters, previous to his general manager job with the Washington Commanders, was the assistant general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. So he knows Brandon more than I do, more than you do, things like that. So if Adam Peters says to Dan Quinn, yes, he would be a fit here, you have no reason not to bring him in, especially if Dan Quinn is going to be his own defensive play caller next year. Because if you're going to be a head coach that's running your own defense, you need that offense to be as stocked as possible. Because if you can't have your hands on it on game day as much as you need to, or as much as you might need to, you need to be able to know that that system is stocked full of weapons and is going to be able to do what they need to do. Brandon Aiyuk turns 28 next offseason. Next season. Yes, he's coming off that injury. He would be about 18 months removed from that injury, however, when he makes his debut for the Washington Commanders. So that's a good amount of time to recover from that type of a knee injury, all of those things. And if you pair him with Terry McLaurin, if you can bring back Deebo Samuel, I'll tell you what, guys, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, Luke McCaffrey healthy again, Jalen Lane, that's a 5-receiver set. We're going to talk about Treylon Burks here in just a little bit as well. That's a pretty solid 6-receiver group. If you can bring that group back to Washington in 2026. But for right now, let's pivot over to Dr. Wonderful, who came through in the mailbag and wants to know about the potential contradiction in Dan Quinn's philosophy. Again, DQ originally came in and said he's going to be this executive head coach because he learned from his time in Atlanta, but the recent pivot to play calling and him saying that he could potentially keep that position next year does suggest that he's abandoning his CEO model. And yes, on the surface, I would say it does suggest that he's abandoning that model. However, I would also caution everybody, before we have any, I'm not saying that Dr. Wonderful is having a negative reaction necessarily, but understand this, and I say this on this episode, on this show a lot, so every day, as you've heard me say this before, every week, every day even, is an opportunity to get new information, right? So when you ask me coming up here in just a little bit on this episode, is Treylon Burks a player that the Washington Commanders need to bring back in 2026? I'm going to tell you right now, as of right now, do they need to? No. Would I be down with it? Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you that because this new information that we had, this last catch that we had, this viral catch that we have is great, but it's not going to be the end all be all. However, Treylon has the opportunity to go out there and perform this weekend against the Minnesota Vikings, next weekend against the New York Giants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by the end of the season, I might be pounding the table saying they've got to bring back Treylon Burks. And you might say, wait, dude, there's this other episode early December. You were like, nah, I mean, if they bring him back, great. But if not, it's not that big of a deal. What gives? Well, what gives is I now have new information. Dan Quinn, what he also promised when he got here is he's not going to be a coach that is just fixated on this is my way. There is no other way. So what Dan Quinn has basically done is he's brought in new information. He's received new information, and it has changed the way he views that he needs to run his team. And I think that's a great leadership characteristic. Now, again, we've got 5 more games and we've got an offseason, and Dan Quinn may decide to shift back to that original plan, or he may decide to stick on this plan. Who knows? But I think that the fact that you have a sign that a head coach is willing to receive new information as it comes in, process it honestly, and make decisions that are for the better of the team, I think it's a great sign for the future of the Washington Commanders. Speaking of Treylon Burks, one viral catch does not guarantee a roster spot next season. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift giving season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time, because it's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories all year long for years and years to come. Because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before even giving it. So when the person you give it to plugs it in, the memories are already there. There's no app to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. I mentioned this on a previous episode. My niece just had her first child. And so this is an idea of a perfect gift for new parents just starting out, man. Get some of those baby pictures, get that frame, preload those baby pictures, those first family photos. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com and get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames. Named number 1 by Wirecutter by using promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's AURAFrames.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. One viral catch does not guarantee a roster spot next season, but Treylon Burks has been doing more than just making one viral catch that makes me believe that he could be, and even possibly should be, part of the future plans for the Washington Commanders. Insider Michael came through and said, looking ahead to the offseason, noting that Washington has a massive free agent class, potentially over 30 players hitting the open market. Michael wants to know who specifically needs to finish this season strong to prove they deserve a contract extension. And of course, Treylon Burks is going to come up in that conversation here in just a minute as well. But I want to hit this first. And I think the first guy that you have to look at is Chris Rodriguez. I think Chris Rodriguez Jr., he's a player that obviously a lot of us here on this show or in this program are going to sit and be like, yeah, does he need more opportunities to prove himself? Certainly. But the bottom line is he's proven himself in the opportunities he's gotten. And I really stand by this. I think there are 31 other NFL teams that they've got pro scouts that watch teams every single week of the year. There are 31 NFL teams who have a scout in their building that is prepared to say, or is already saying, Chris Rodriguez Jr. is a running back who doesn't have a lot of mileage on him because the Washington Commanders haven't used him a whole lot. He's proven that he is willing to go out there and adjust his body, put the work in the offseason on his own, do those things, which shows great discipline and commitment. And when you put him on the field, he produces. That checks every single block for a Washington, for any team. So the Washington Commanders, I already think the Washington Commanders, if I was Adam Peters, I might already be in conversations with Chris Rodriguez's agent, talking extension into the offseason. Do I think he still has something to prove? I think absolutely, because I don't think that every single person in the building is necessarily bought in that Chris can be either the guy or at least one of the guys moving forward. You see this pattern with them, with him, where they kind of use him in the beginning of the game, they sit him for a little while, they bring him back at the end of the game. All those kinds of things. I totally get that mantra, that mentality. We've talked about that mentality, that approach multiple times on this episode or on these episodes. But I also think you need to get him involved throughout the game as well. Keep him involved. 11 carries against the Denver Broncos. You'd love to see that number go up to like 15, 16, if possible, against the Minnesota Vikings. So that's at least one guy. Deebo Samuel, I don't think that he really has to prove anything in my mind. I know there are some people who think that Deebo Samuel has some things to prove to the Washington Commanders before they decide to bring him back. I think he's basically proven everything you need him to prove. So you need to go ahead and go out there and bring him back again. And then you look at a guy like left guard Chris Paul. Has he done enough? He's also a player with an expiring contract. Has he done enough to warrant the Washington Commanders bringing him back? I think some would say yes. Some would be like, yeah, he's done well, but let's see him finish strong. I'm definitely more in the ilk of let's see him finish strong, because like I've said before on these episodes as well, every day, as you'll recognize this, it's hard to be good in the NFL. It's even harder to be good in the NFL twice. So is Chris Paul going to be this successful, this good in 2026 when everybody has tape on him, when everybody sees what the O-line looks with him in it? I don't know. The only way to have really a lot of confidence that he's going to be is if he finishes 2025 strong these last 5 games, the way he's played in some of the other games previous to the season. So I think those are some guys that you need to look out for as far as expiring contracts are concerned. Now let's get to Treylon Burks, where TJ comes through. Insider TJ basically wants a scouting report on Treylon Burks following his highlight reel catch against the Denver Broncos, and ask if Treylon has the ability to be a true wide receiver 1 or 2, or should expectations be tempered. I would lean on the temper expectations part. I think Treylon Burks has the opportunity to be kind of a second big receiver for a team. And I put it that way because, like, with Terry and Deebo on the field, is Treylon Burks number 2? No, he's a number 3, right? And he benefits from being that number 3. And there's nothing wrong with being a really good number 3. I would basically put that right now. I would say that's what I would put his ceiling at. Again, next week, the following week, there's plenty more weeks just this season alone to get different information. But the thing I really love about Treylon Burks since he's been here is, one, he's kept his head down. He hasn't come in here as being like, I'm a first-round pick, looking to prove to everybody why I was a first-round pick and all this stuff. But when you want to talk about what was his resume coming out of college, obviously big, long receiver, but the ability to high point and faster than maybe you would expect a guy with his build to be. Those were all the points that you saw out of Treylon Burks coming out of college. Those are some of the points you still see today. I've said it before on these episodes as well. Players really don't necessarily change who they are. Coaching, scheme, and certainly experience is a great teacher as well. And I think Treylon Burks can benefit from some of those things here in Washington. So would I love to see him come back? Absolutely. But I'll tell you right now, if you got Brandon Aiyuk here, if you bring in Brandon Aiyuk, you got Terry McLaurin. If they re-sign Deebo, they bring in Brandon Aiyuk. If Treylon Burks finishes this season strong, I don't know that Treylon Burks is going to want to come back and compete for the 4th spot on this roster, or even theoretically compete for the 3rd spot on this roster over Brandon Aiyuk. But Brandon Aiyuk, a much more established receiver, a guy who's basically shown more and more that he's going to be able to pull it off. Because if Treylon Burks finishes this season strong for the Washington Commanders, he, again, is going to have suitors out there who are going to look for him to come in, maybe even compete for that number 2 spot, or at least be in that number 3 spot. It's going to basically turn into a situation similar to Olamide Zaccheaus, where you have a good enough season to where other teams are offering you a better opportunity to get reps than the Washington Commanders can, because of the depth in their wide receiver room. So again, it takes 2 to tango. So Treylon Burks doesn't come back. If he does finish strong this season, doesn't come back, don't necessarily just immediately go to the pool of, man, I can't believe Adam Peters didn't re-sign Treylon Burks, because it takes more than just Adam Peters wanting to re-sign a guy to actually re-sign a guy. Love that viral catch. Love his approach that he's had since he's arrived. It's been really cool to talk to him here and there in the locker room. He's put in the work. He's kept his head down. Hasn't been negative about anything. Has only been positive. Absolutely love that he's having the success. I hope that we continue to see it in Minnesota, et cetera, down the line. But I'm not to the point now where I say, boom, you got to bring him in. You have to keep him. And honestly, there's definitely, like I said, a reality where the Commanders try to keep him, but he sees better opportunities elsewhere based off of what he was able to produce in his time in Washington. So that would be a great problem to have if you're the Washington Commanders, to be quite honest with you, is you have too much talent to keep a guy who's really good and still young on your roster. There are other positions, however, that the Washington Commanders need to fix, but the ones they don't need to fix, they need to keep from breaking and causing themselves more work than they already have ahead of them. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels just a little bit different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And it's not just football, it's also NBA. Just yesterday, I was watching the Golden State Warriors basketball game. I decided to get in the action. I laid down a live same-game parlay, 3-leg parlay, and I hit on all 3 legs. Super exciting. Made that game even more entertaining for me, because with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. So in the NFL, when a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or a momentum flips after a turnover, FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, this weekend, Visit FanDuel.com, place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. The Washington Commanders have plenty of things they can try to fix this offseason. So what they need to do is prevent themselves from trying to fix positions that are not actually broken. Insider Ricky wants a summary for rookie linebacker Jordan McGee. He also argues that the box score lied about Terry McLaurin's impact, noting that Terry was even more open in the game, but overthrown several times, and his presence opened up the field for other players. First of all, I think the box score on Terry McLaurin was really great. I think the box score, especially for a guy playing his first game back, coming back from an injury, is exactly what you would want to see. And I think that, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but here on this program, we 1000% put a stamp of approval on all of the trickle-down economics that we had talked about potentially happening before the game, absolutely coming true. I think that's something that we really saw out of Terry McLaurin. So again, if you just stat scout and you just read the box score, maybe you're not super impressed, I guess. But I think that what Terry was able to do on the field, 1000% only reinforced his value to this team. And we talked about before the season or before the game, right? Even with only having played 4 games before playing his 5th game against the Denver Broncos, his catch percentage and his successful catch percentage were both top 1 and 2 in his career so far. So Terry was showing, that whole 30-year-old thing and him saying, look, I can be better even though I'm turning 30 and all these things. I know the injuries came in, and the irony here is the first game he played as a 30-year-old was that Raiders game where he injured his quad. So that's the irony of the entire situation. But the fact that McLaurin is still shown he is one of the elite talents in the NFL cannot be disputed. I think you saw that again in action Sunday night. And Dan Quinn saying no aggravation, no problems coming up from playing that game, even though Terry played almost double the snap limit he was supposed to play against the Denver Broncos, is a great sign that going into Minnesota, he could be even better, at least just as good. And if Marcus Mariota can get that timing down a little bit, because like Ricky pointed out, there were some opportunities that Marcus Mariota missed, not just honestly with Terry, but with some other receivers as well. If Marcus Mariota can get that a little bit more even keel, especially playing in the dome and all that kind of stuff this coming Sunday, it could look even better. As far as Jordan McGee, high energy, high IQ, I mean, pretty much everything that you wanted to see out of Jordan McGee, but I think he also did a really good job of turning that ability to help into being an impact player. One of his best graded games on Pro Football Focus this season. I think Jordan McGee's upside continues to show itself time and time again when he gets the opportunity. Absolutely love it. I'm absolutely looking forward to the opportunity to see Jordan McGee take even another step next year, because he's been a lot healthier this year than he was last year. And I think that's going to have a very big impact on his growth into year 3 as well coming up next season. Still want to see Bobby Wagner come back. And I know some of you are not on that ilk or not on that page with me, but there's a video going out there of Bobby Wagner reading the offense being like, hey, Jacob Martin, you're supposed to be rushing. I need you to get back out into coverage. Jacob listens to Bobby, he gets back out into coverage. He makes the play to break up the pass, brings up a punt by the Denver Broncos. That's the kind of stuff that right now I don't think Jordan McGee is ready to do. And look, Bobby Wagner had his first game calling the defense, right? Like before you can become a Hall of Famer, you have to have your first game calling defense. Jordan McGee, I think eventually will get to that point, and he's got to get to that point. But you know what? It's okay to give him one more year with Bobby Wagner. Let's wait till year 4. Let's let him get a little bit more polished up. I think I'm okay with that. Insider Merle came through. Last question of this mailbag episode, asking if the Commanders should consider shaking up the offensive line by getting Nick Allegretti or rookie Timothy McKay prepared to challenge for Tyler Biadasz's center job. I'm assuming next season, because I don't think Tyler Biadasz is losing his job this season. I will tell you this. As far as Nick Allegretti is concerned, no, not as a challenger, right? Nick Allegretti is already, in my eyes anyway, essentially the backup center. I think that, he got a lot of center reps in training camp. I told you guys about that as well. So that already has been a thing. As far as Timothy McKay potentially challenging to be center, listen, I think first we need to see him get some real meaningful reps. I think that's kind of the first step there. They obviously like him a lot. They brought him in injured. They kept him. They've been working with him. All these things. Now, am I, 2-3 years from now, could Timothy McKay potentially be a challenger for a starting center? Sure, that potential could absolutely be there. Next year, I think let's just get him healthy. Let's just get him on the field, and let's go from there. You know what I mean? I don't want to say it's not going to happen. I don't want to say it couldn't happen, right? But let's get him on the field to the point where we can see him get some reps before we get too excited about what the potential is. Clearly the team likes him, which gives you reason to be excited about him anyway. But bear in mind, since training camp, no media member has seen him take a single rep because we don't get to see those live reps of practice during the regular season, which means if we're not seeing him, you're not seeing him, you're not hearing about him. I like the potential in Timothy McKay, but until we see some fruit from that tree, I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, next year he should be challenging Tyler Biadasz for the starting center job. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, crossover Thursday, Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and myself will break down what to expect this coming Sunday when the Washington Commanders travel north to the state of Minnesota. In the meantime, if you got questions, comments, you want to contribute to future mailbag episodes, you want to get inside information, additional communication from me that goes beyond the episodes, become a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Find out what the national media thinks about Washington and thinks about the rest of the national landscape as well, twice per day on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And I thank you again for coming through yet again for today's episode. Till next time, everybody out there, please stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.